Welcome back to Calvary Baptist Church of Burbank. This is our Good Friday message to you for this year. A little bit briefer, I hope, today. And just with all that's going on, it seems very strange that we as a church are not able to meet over the Easter period. But life is different, and people are noticeably fearful. People are noticeably shaken. And Easter is a good reminder for us that for us, death does not have the same meaning. For us, death is a very different thing than it is for an unbeliever. Death is something that is still sad and it's still tragic. And there is always that sense of it shouldn't be. But we don't mourn, Paul tells us, as those who have no hope. That our mourning in the face of death and our dealing in the face of difficulty is different for the very reason that we have hope. And it is all down to the Easter message. Right now, I'm becoming increasingly aware that these messages are going out to those of you who, some of whom are sick, some of whom have lost your jobs, some of you are concerned for your own businesses. And we are facing, for many of us in our lifetimes, an unprecedented time of trial and difficulty in a communal sense. And it is a good time, if nothing else, to remind ourselves of what really matters. I'm so aware that when we lose things in this life that are valuable to us, that there is a sense of mourning that goes along with it. And it is good and right that the Bible gives us a methodology for lamenting in the midst of these losses. And one of the things that I've been doing over this period of quarantine, as it were, is trying to put my thoughts on lament down into writing. And so I'm well aware of the need to lament and the need to cry and the need to shout out. And God doesn't just give us permission to do that, but he insists that we must. But when these things are taken away and when these cries are made, we must remember that ultimately at the end of the day, all that we have is Christ. That the losses that we feel, they hurt, but they're not like the losses of those who don't believe. That the tragedies that happen in our lives are still tragic, but they're not the same as those who don't believe. And we might feel apprehensive, some of us, as we face death, but we shouldn't. Not like unbelievers. For us, our entire faith is summed up in the events that happened on the cross at Calvary. That Jesus was there dying in our place for our sins. And let's be frank, we ultimately have nothing to offer God. We kid ourselves if we think otherwise. He sees our every thought. He sees our every deed. He knows our every motivation. He knows our every failing. And yet, in his perfection, he took upon himself the punishment that was ours for our sin. That doesn't make the losing of a job inconsequential. It doesn't make relatives getting sick or dying inconsequential, but it does make it different. Because we believe in a God who is sovereign over all things and takes even the most sinful and tragic and terrible of circumstances, like the cross, and uses it to bring about his glory and our good. And many of us right now are going to be in times when we're looking at the circumstances around us and we're thinking, where are you in this, God? Where is your love? Where is your compassion? How could you let this happen? And in that sense, Easter is very well timed this year, because it is our reminder to look at the cross and to see in the cross that in the worst of sins, in the worst of times, in the darkest of hours, he is still in control, he is still good, and he can still be trusted. Ultimately, all we have that really matters is the righteousness that we have been clothed with because of the death of Christ. We would do well this Easter not to belittle the suffering of others, but to love one another by pointing each other again to the cross. For there, more than anywhere else, we see the glory of God. We see his character. We see his sovereignty. We see his goodness. We see his love. We see his compassion. And as we look at it, and as we stare in amazement at the gift of life through the death of Christ, let us bow the knee and let us say, even in this, I trust you, O God. May God be with us and bless us richly this Easter period.